official welcome to our podcast and our YouTube channel. Very excited to have you here. And after, I think, probably like a decade or so of not really seeing you.
I know.
Like crazy.
A long time.
The good aspect of social media. To
right.
be able to keep in touch.
It's true. Follow
reconnect.
Everyone's lives.
Yeah. So with that, I would love for you to basically say kind of what got you to this place. Obviously, we all worked together in mortgage before, and you are so far removed from mortgage now.
We did.
That maybe catch up, or whatever you want to say to kind of coming to this place and what it looks like now.
I worked for a large mortgage company and was downsized when the mortgage industry took a turn for the worse, probably 11 years ago now. 11 years ago. And I volunteered in a hospital because there was nowhere else to really go to get a mortgage job. Volunteered at a hospital, and the nurses were pretty mean to the patients. And I thought, with this mortgage customer service, I can make a difference with that, kind of customer service background. And started off at Thomas Jefferson University and was working in an emergency room. And then left Thomas Jefferson and went to Immaculata, got a bachelor's in nursing.
Okay.
Went to Western Governors and got a master's in nursing. And then
you didn't realize.
August 1st, on August 1st, I got a doctorate in nursing education.
I know.
Oh my goodness, yes.
She's not Lender anymore.
It's Dr. Elles.
Dr.
Yes,
Elles.
it's Dr. Ellis. And I, for the first 30 days, didn't answer to anything else.
Nice.
Even at home, I didn't. It was a long road. It was a lot. It was to go from sort of the prereqs at the college level where you have to do algebra at 43 to then, getting a doctorate with advanced statistics sort of as part of the journey. But along the way, I was developing this company and this web app based on my experience as the mother of a addict that's now in recovery. And originally, when I went into the program to get my doctorate, I knew I wanted to do something addiction focused, and it needed to be something that
for your doctorate.
Yes, that was going to help the community as a whole. That's sort of the basis of the project, where they, give you the doctorate at the end. You have to do this project. And it was a long time to get it fine-tuned to what it was going to be.
Sure.
And finally it came down to the stress and strain experienced by the caregiver of the addict, because it's something that nobody talks about. And it happens in so many different ways, and it's experienced so differently for everyone. So for one family, it may be a super financial strain. And for another family, it may be physical symptoms that manifest in a myriad of ways.
Yeah.
Back problems, neck problems, digestive problems, can't sleep, lose time from work because they can't sleep. The family comes apart. So I did a study, and I had 143 families participate in the study. And it came out that there wasn't one family that was not impacted by their loved one's addiction. And it wasn't focused just on children. It was everyone.
Yeah.
Their husbands, their wives, their brothers, their grandmothers, their mothers, their spouses. And how it impacted, and there was 13 questions. Did this impact you financially? Did this impact you emotionally? Were there time lost from work? Was there time lost with other family members? Things like that. And typical bell curve, and there's two tails, 5% outliers to the left and right. There was nothing on one side of the bell curve. There was nothing where people were like, didn't really bother me, just kind of kept on going. Everything was skewed to the right. Yeah. And even the woman that did my statistics, she was like, this is pretty unheard of. It's pretty much just, the data was overwhelming about what the impact was to families. And originally my thought was, let's put together a paper brochure and we'll have treatment facilities branded as their own, They can give it out, and people can digest it slowly over time. And then I realized that paper was a dinosaur. So we moved into sort of a more internet web-based space, and Navigating Addiction was born. And it is a web app and a mobile app that gives you so many choices and different ways to help yourself. So for the first time, it's something that's not based on how to help the person with addiction. It's based on how to help you. So it's a text crisis line that you can text in the middle of the night saying, please help, what do I do? So we text help to 741-741, and you'll get a live person. It's not a bot on the other end. We have a nutritionist.
Nice. I saw that.
We have a life coach.
On the website, yeah.
We have a financial coach, because that's the other really hard-hitting impact that doesn't get talked about a lot, because for years addiction was stereotypically lower income, lower socioeconomic standpoint. So what did we have to worry about if our loved one was hitting their trust fund?
Right.
Now there is no boundaries anymore whatsoever. So for our people that do have a greater, more substantial amount of money in the bank and risk there, how do you protect that risk, and how do you thoughtfully try and support the person in addiction without losing everything you have? So Mike Lewis is our his son is in recovery as well, and he's our financial coach. We have an amazing life coach, Siobhan Trainer, also has ties to the addiction community. Our nutritionist is just amazing, because what happens is we let all of the self-care go. So when you have a loved one that's in crisis, there's nothing that you keep. Your well is just dry.
Yep.
Your cup is empty. So there's nothing that you reach for at the end of the day, whether it be meditation or a good meal or a great night's sleep. It all goes by the wayside. So we try and sort of support that, and we also support online meetings. There's this great website that has meetings 24/7 called intherooms.com, and it's all free, and you can go on and you can participate in a meeting until you find one that clicks for you. So my organization supports Nar-Anon and Al-Anon, which is the family sort of branch of AA and NA, but we don't believe that there's one right way to love an addict. With my daughter's situation, if I had released her, so she was 15 when she started, and she pretty much went very quickly from marijuana to heroin. There was not a lot of sort of dabbling in other things. It was pretty quick trajectory, off the cliff.
And just for a quick perspective, how old is she now?
She's 29.
Okay.
Doesn't that make you feel old?
I remember 15 for her.
Marty's shaking his head.
Weren't we still at BHH together?
We were.
Like when she was 15? Yes.
No, she was younger. She was even younger. And that's sort of where people are really starting now, even younger sometimes.
Yeah.
And Nar-Anon was started in 1971, and there were not 15-year-old heroin addicts. There just weren't.
Right.
So to say release them with love sounds very healthy and boundaries and all that stuff, but when you're still
15,
legally responsible for that person, you can't say, well, it was nice to meet you and I'll see you when you're feeling better. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, and it wouldn't have worked for my daughter. She really wasn't built for the streets. She's very small, tiny stature, and would have been pretty much eaten alive by the streets if that had been the path. So I held on for dear life, but there's no one right way to do it. And that's sort of where Navigating Addiction tells you, try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, then take a step back, and then maybe you have to restart and reset and try something different, because there isn't going to be one right thing. The most important thing is no shame, no judgment.
Because that's what I was just going to say. I think that when you speak it out, and then, we walked through it with Nicole, and when I had to talk to my boss my previous boss about kind of, I need some time off to do this at X, Y, and Z, and I have to tell you what the situation is now because I'm asking you for kind of an open-ended understanding about, that I'll need some time here and there. And unless you've kind of walked through it or are close to it, then I think it's easy to judge, or, like, people don't necessarily know what it should look like versus what it really does.
It's true. And for me, it took a long time to speak it out loud, and it took even longer for me not to think it was my fault. Because for the first few years, you couldn't have talked me out of the fact that it was my fault for anything.
Right.
And now I know it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
And she is in a much healthier place.
Good.
But it was many, many rehabs later,
Yes.
and many thousands and thousands of dollars later, and just the emotional toll, the physical toll on not just me, but everybody around her, which is why I did the study and really developed Navigating Addiction, was to support the people that are in the background struggling with what to do next, because there are many people that don't even live within miles of a meeting, even if they wanted to try to go to Nar-Anon or Al-Anon.
Yeah.
They are living in rural communities. And I just saw a statistic, did you see on the news this morning, they said that in places where auto manufacturing has closed down, the addiction rate has gone up 85%.
So like a Detroit kind of
situation where auto manufacturing has closed down.
85%.
And it's the other thing that's so interesting. So career-wise, all this time I worked in an emergency room. I worked in home care, palliative oncology, home care. I was a nurse manager, and now I teach nursing. And every orientation day, so the first day of the new group of students, almost every time someone says to me, I'm from Pittsburgh, we have the worst problem with addiction in the United States. The most interesting thing is every single group, it's a different town, and they all think that this is the worst place for addiction in the United States. So that's how bad it must be in all these places, that all of these, and I want to say kids, but they're not all kids, because it's any age from 19 to I've had 55-year-old students. So anything in between, they all feel that the problem in their hometown is so bad that it's the worst in the United States. And the worst in the United States is 20 miles up 95, right? So that's the heroin hub of
Really?
the
That's
United
the worst
States
in the U.S.?
is Kensington. So as far as being an open air heroin market, have you seen Intervention season 6?
No.
So I'm going to encourage you to watch it, just because you can't believe that this is going on so close. And when I was doing community health for one of the local nursing schools, we were put into Kensington at the community center to do community health for their population of people. And in my mind, it was going to be the people that were living on the streets right there in Kensington. Interestingly enough, their population is underserved Hispanic community members that live around that center, not at all with the addiction population. So
wow,
it was very surprising, and it's a Catholic run organization.
Right.
Food bank, clothing, ESL, all kinds of things, and they sort of pretend that this is not going on right outside their door. And I don't know if it's that they don't know how to manage it, but and even the food bank is geared towards people that have a stove, a microwave, a sink. It's not easy portable food like a granola bar.
Right.
Yeah.
So
like a sandwich, you gotta go and cook something.
right, everything. And so on week 1, we sort of got together as a group, the students and I, and everyone went out to their community of people, and they said, this is what we need. We need granola bars, Pop-Tarts, water bottles, and clothing.
Yeah.
And the response was so unbelievable that the following week we had bags, I mean just these huge bags, and we were walking the streets of Kensington, and they were a little afraid at first, and I don't have that street fear, I just don't have it.
Right.
And there's
I don't think you've ever had any fear.
no,
I
no, and it was so interesting because they're a very sheltered, lovely group of nursing students that had never seen anything like this. They couldn't believe, even though before the first day I encouraged them to watch Intervention because the entire season was filmed in Kensington.
Right.
So some did, some didn't, but it didn't prepare them. And it's the worst it's ever been right now, to the point where there's no more sort of secrecy in the actual using of heroin. People are just sitting in the street with the needle in their arm, they're passed out, they are nodded off. We were doing the sternal rub, knuckles on the chest for people. We were calling 911, people were asking us to look at their wounds. We were swarmed, and the most interesting thing that we didn't have week one was socks.
I had heard that, I think you had told me before that socks were the biggest thing.
Socks were the biggest
Socks
thing.
and shoes kind of thing.
And the excitement over receiving this pair of socks was just overwhelming. So every week these students would come with things that they had collected, and they all made the Amazon site to be able to give a donation through just being able to send a product right to either my house or their house. And the person that was running the community center, I don't know if she thought we were taking her things, but she said, "Oh, we don't really endorse that." And I'm like, "No, these are our things that we brought here
Right.
to do as we're leaving for the day."
Yeah.
So we gave them a chunk of time to help with the food bank and the clothing drive and things like that. And the students, the only one out of 20 ended up saying, "I can't go out there anymore. I
Too
can't.
much.
I'm too afraid."
Oh.
And I was
I thought you were going to say overwhelming.
no,
But
they
afraid.
were all in for it. They were like, "Yeah, we're going to do this," because nurses and just sort of their lives had been touched by addiction. So one had lost a brother to an overdose. One had a parent that was an addict. And they were like, "No, we're just, you lead the way and we're going." And we would just be swarmed by people. And it was interesting at one point because we handed somebody a shirt, a woman, and she said, "Oh, do you have it in pink?"
I mean,
And it's funny, just the human psyche of, I'm getting something for free, I might as well see
Might as
if
well
there
ask.
is what I want, right? And we had to say no, and then several times we would just run out every week within 30 minutes. We couldn't even carry enough stuff. We would go back to the cars, bring more. I mean, the need was so overwhelming in that community and it's funny because there's critics that'll say, "Well, that's enabling." The socks or the granola bar is not going to be what turns somebody from, "I'm ready to be done with this," to, "Oh, I'm going to stay out for a few more weeks because now I have socks and a granola bar." So
Right.
that's never going to be sort of
right.
the enabling scenario that people think that it is.
Yeah, I'm not writing them a check for $1,000. I'm doing that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And just the people would say, "Do you realize the impact you're making and how you're just making it comfortable for just one more minute, one more day?" And I just thought, if my daughter was out there, I just would want somebody like me to be saying, "Here's dry socks." Because we would go after a Sunday when it was a deluge of rain,
Right.
and everybody would be pretty damp because there's an entire section right off of Kensington Avenue where there are people in stadium chairs, soccer mom seats, little pop-up tents with blankets over their heads, and that's sort of their life. And you and I were talking about where do they use the bathroom, like where do they relieve themselves, and it's pretty much right there on the street. and it's a big problem to the point where now the city has set up these bathrooms that are monitored by a bathroom monitor outside so that they can't use an overdose in the bathrooms, but there's a trailer on the street. And then Temple University has a wound care van that comes around that will treat the infected wounds in their arms and their feet. And once a month, Temple brings a shower setup that's in a trailer where people can shower. I mean, and that's our reality. I mean, that kind of hits hard, right? This is 2019, going to be 2020 in the United States. How are we not able to sort of get our arms around this and get these people some help?
Well, I think there's such a stigma to it, and you know, this, like, it could never be me, it could never be someone I know, and surely that person made bad decisions, or you know, like it never is something like a snowball, slow rolling effect. It's like, no, they did stuff wrong, or they just don't want to work.
Right.
And it's funny, I remember still to this day when I was younger, I won't say who it was just out of respect, but for someone that we were going on, it was through a youth group, we were going into an area where there's homeless to help, and there was one of the gentlemen there, the adults there, he was basically like, don't give them money, don't, you know, and it was someone that you know, everyone would listen to, and someone who had a voice, and even his perspective there, I heard him say it, and I thought, isn't that kind of the opposite? Like, basically, don't make eye contact, they're just going to ask you for money and go buy drugs or alcohol with it, and we're not here to whatever, you know, just give out these sandwiches and that's it. Like, don't, you know, kind of interact any further. And I think there's just a miss there on the human connection.
There is, and that's what everybody's looking for, is that human connection. But so often what happens is these people have a coexisting condition of mental illness, and they don't want to be on the mental illness medication that they need for their condition. So they self-medicate either with alcohol or drugs, and then they have sort of the mental illness going on plus the addiction, and you land in the street after you have exhausted all of the goodwill of your relatives and your friends, and you've couch surfed, and you've sort of exhausted all of your own resources, and then there's nowhere to go but the street. But you're still hearing voices, or you're still manic, or you're still OCD to the point of you're making repetitive behaviors over and over again, and that's where the drugs sort of come in. But the mental illness in this country is treated so poorly, and I knew it was bad, but then my students did a project on how mental illness is handled in other countries, and we are so far above what's happening there, because it's truly a secret. If your relative has mental illness, you are not to talk about it, and they don't go anywhere for treatment. They just suffer silently at home. And this was in several countries, several students that interviewed people from Nigeria and Puerto Rico and Mexico, where we just don't talk about it. We just, and the treatment is so far away from where they live that they can't even get the treatment. And then you just want to numb your mind, so you're turning to drugs and alcohol.
Right. So now that kind of goes into the family.
It goes into the family, and every single family member that we interviewed had an impact somewhere in their life, whether it be that they lost time from work, or they lost their job, or they spent thousands of dollars on rehab facilities. I know that for my daughter, she was covered for many years under my health insurance, but there were co-payments and deductibles and plane tickets. There was a time where she wasn't back from Florida for an hour and she was already out getting drugs. because at that point she wasn't ready. So it
Right.
was rehab after rehab, and you know, there's an argument with, you know, that relapse is part of recovery. And then again, there's no one right way to do that, right? So it was, okay, so we've relapsed again, we have to reset. But now with the addition of fentanyl to heroin,
Mhm.
it's not the same as it was years ago where you could go out and relapse over and over and over again. Now what's happening is you're relapsing and you're dying. And the amount of heroin fentanyl deaths has skyrocketed in 2019 because the amount of fentanyl that's needed to kill you is the size of a head of a pin when it's
Wow.
added to heroin.
So, and that is just, so I was going to say, I'm not terribly familiar with fentanyl and it being added to, so it's just kind of an extra layer, if you will, of the drug.
It is.
then.
It's 1,000 times more powerful than morphine. So
Wow.
when you add that to heroin, what happens is your brain forgets to tell your lungs to breathe, basically. And you just, your respiration's slow to a point where you just sort of stop breathing. And the fentanyl is what's killing people now, to the point where savvy addicts are buying test strips to test their heroin for whether or not there's fentanyl in it before they'll even use,
To not take it.
to not die.
Okay.
Right.
I wasn't sure if there was an extra.
Well, and that's the other thing that I was surprised to learn from my daughter. And I said, because each little bag is stamped with the dealer's calling card. So it might be 007 or a fire truck or a tiny little stamp. And I said to her one time, well, why would people keep going back for that if they know that it is killed and they've seen on the news? And she said, well, they never think it's going to happen to them. They want the best high. So that's going to be the best high, but it's not going to kill me.
Right.
And then it does.
Right.
She has lost probably in this year alone, I can think of at least 10 friends
Really.
that have gone back out for just one more time and have died on their relapse day because they can't handle the same amount that they were using before. And by the way, now here there's fentanyl
Right.
that's attached to it.
Right.
So I don't know. And then, you know, that whole brings into, you know, the safe injection sites, and do we really want a safe injection site where nobody dies? And if you look at these other countries that have that, you know, their addiction rates have plummeted after they've introduced a safe injection sites, because I don't know, is it not as dangerous anymore? Is it not as sexy? Is it not as, you know, living on the edge? I don't know what the story behind it is, but I think we're going to be getting one here pretty soon in Philadelphia.
So what do you say to the families? I mean, if they don't have people around them, you know, anybody else, since it's not really talked about, like, I don't know if we have anybody that has talked about a addiction in the family, you know, that we know. Can you think of anybody?
No.
Yeah.
Not a one.
But it's
Maybe alcohol 20 years ago, but
Right,
Right.
but
not
now,
no.
and it's doesn't matter if you're from the most affluent town in the most beautiful area of the country to urban Philadelphia, North
Camden,
Philly,
yeah.
street level, you know, addiction. It doesn't matter. It's
Right.
everywhere. And what you say to the family is, don't be ashamed
right,
and reach out for help.
right,
I mean, the really unique thing about navigating addiction is we are the only app that's out there for the loved one. There is no other one. We launched on September 1st, and we followed no other app. We didn't piggyback off someone else that was already doing this. There's literally nothing else out there. Now there are local sort of, you know, the Addict
Buildings,
Parents
kinda.
United in Connecticut, and little pockets of communities in places that it's become really bad that there's these grassroots efforts.
Right.
We are nationwide 24/7 and solely focused on you to help you navigate how to use Narcan, where to go in a crisis, how to recognize the drugs, what the drugs look like, what these things mean. No one knew what kratom was, right? fentanyl,
Yeah.
all of these sort of new terms, Molly, ecstasy, things that are considered now designer drugs, that we just think to ourselves, well, can you overdose from that? Can you, and where do you get reliable information that's up to date? And that's what we're sort of gearing up to do, is to provide the most up-to-date information as new things come on the market, that really support that person that's feeling like, well, because I can remember being in the emergency room, the crisis center at Lourdes, and everyone was trying to figure out how to best help my daughter, and I just was standing there, and you feel so alone because nobody cares about how to help you at all, because what's wrong with you? You just need to jump in and help her. But it's really not. I mean, I don't think I took a deep breath for years. It was the first thought when I went to sleep. It was the first thought when I woke up. It consumed me. I was addicted to her addiction. It was every thought, every day. I couldn't do anything. I was paralyzed by it because I only have the one, right? So if she was going to die from this, where was I going to be, right?
Right. Well, and even kind of to the point, I would have to think of, while she's in it for sure, but then, as you say, like knowing that relapse is part of the, course to recovery or road to recovery, then is this the last one?
Right.
Is this the last relapse? Or, where are there kind of signs for the parents or the family, siblings, whatever, to know, like, okay, maybe we're on the road, or maybe it's always a thing.
And she told me what the signs were. And it was so interesting because once she got clean, she said, if you see these things coming, this is where it's headed. If I stop going to meetings, if I stop calling you or FaceTiming you or coming around, if I'm asking for money, these are the things you need to look for. And it was such an honest moment, because there's not a lot of honesty when it comes to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because these are really, really smart people, and super manipulative. And I don't say that in a bad way. It's that there has been this curtain that has come down, and there is one goal, and it's not even to get high anymore. It's to not get sick.
Right.
So there's no more, when somebody's been out there for several years, there's no more, I'm going to wake up today and get high. All you're thinking of is, what can I do not to get sick today? So the high is gone. You're just trying to maintain the withdrawal and
I was
not
just gonna
having
say,
the withdrawal.
And the sick is the withdrawal.
Yes.
Yeah.
The sick is the withdrawal. So you're just trying to maintain a steady state at some point. You're not really, it's not that happy high that you got years ago. You're just trying to not get sick.
So what about the prescription drugs that they get now, kind of in the weaning off process?
So
or
methadone
whatever?
and Suboxone. So there are pros and cons to them. If you were to ask my daughter and her community of people, she would say absolutely not. It's almost harder to get off of them
That's what I
than it
wondered.
is to walk through the abstinence. But for other people, they will stand up and say, I would be dead if I didn't have methadone. What happens a lot of times is the very greedy providers, because you have to go to a methadone clinic, and Suboxone and Vivitrol. Vivitrol is the pellet in your leg, the shot, which people have dug out of themselves. It's not pretty. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But so it's an opioid blocker, right? So if you dig it out of your leg, then you can get high.
Right.
But there are people that say that if you're weaned the right way off of methadone and Suboxone, it's successful. If you go to a methadone clinic, you don't want anybody to be weaned off of methadone.
Right.
And I've met people that I'll say, how long have you been on methadone? 15 years. 15 years, every day, every single morning, getting up at 5 a.m. to go to a methadone clinic for your dose of methadone. Because they don't give you a bottle of methadone and send you home. You go to the clinic every single day and get it. The Suboxone can be manipulated. It comes in a film. It can be manipulated and sold for heroin. So there's just not one right way. You have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Nicole is on methadone.
She
Or
is.
On
Okay.
and off, yeah.
Okay. And if it's managed the right way, it works.
Yeah.
But it has to be cut down and cut down and cut down in the dose. And if it's not, then you become as addicted to it mentally as you are anything else.
I would definitely say that if it's not one, it's the other for Nicole. Like if
Right.
it's not, she, you know, kind of that emotional and mental addiction is definitely there. So when she's not using and she flips over to that, then she's equally addicted to that, just in the conversations that we've had with her.
Right, and it does oftentimes go off into another addiction. So it'll go off into gambling, into sex, into video games, into porn, into cigarettes, whatever, because they have identified a addiction gene. So both my parents were alcoholics. My daughter's father is an alcoholic. Her grandfather was an alcoholic. You could trace it back almost in a straight line, and there are times when it skips a generation because that generation has become so aware of the collateral damage of the addiction that they swear off of it.
Right.
But then other times it's just off to the races.
Well,
it's just one at, you know,
I mean,
one
that could
straight
be
after
for
the
you.
other.
You know, it, like you're aware of it, and then she maybe not as your daughter, maybe not as close to it.
Right, she was
as you
protected.
were. Right.
Right. She was protected from the chaos of living with an alcoholic, because there's this great book called Adult Children of Alcoholics, and it sort of paints the picture of what that looks like. And the first time I read it, I was like, who wrote a book about me? Where did they get my information?
Right.
Why is this book about me and
Yeah.
no one told me?
Yeah.
Because it's so
I
interesting.
should be getting money for this.
I
for
know.
Sure.
'Cause it's like, here's my childhood right in this book.
Right.
And it's so interesting to see those lines and how similar they are, and the traits. Instant gratification, that's like one of the traits, right? You can't save or plan or sort of think out how you're going to do something. You need to do it right now or you're not interested. That's sort of one of the traits to an adult child of an alcoholic. And you're more comfortable in chaos. So if there's no chaos, you get a little bored and you create chaos. So it's just sort of one of those things where there's such a tie to that I hope that the medical community sort of at some point comes around and goes, oh, okay, so how are we going to help these people that are the collateral damage of all of this addiction? What's the commonality? Because it's going to manifest in people in different ways. I mean, how did it manifest with you?
For what do you mean? For how was I affected by it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was physical.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, is that the mind-body connection, people don't buy into that.
Yeah.
Because I'll say to people, they'll say to me, I'm financially stressed. And then the next breath they'll say, well, I have a pain in my back or my hips. And I'll say, well, that's directly related to this burden that you're carrying, this financial burden.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Have you thought about it? How it?
Well, for Nicole,
Yeah. How it affected you?
other than less trusting of people, but no, aside from that, no.
Did
Not
you lose
really.
sleep?
No, I think the only time not her drugs, it was more of the worrisome of her.
We did have
family.
built up the family. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was more, her family, threatened to come find her and take care of business and kill us one time. So
Right.
So I had a job in Manhattan at the time, and I was like, So if they were to go to my house right now, it'd take me 2 hours to get home. So, needless to say, I didn't work in Manhattan very long. I ended up coming back and finding a job much closer so that I could.
So
be here
did that
something.
impact you financially?
It did.
Mm,
It was less money.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. She pays attention. Yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit. It was a little bit less. But I gained time. But it was more. I enjoyed it in Manhattan. So coming back here was like, I have to leave Central Park every day for lunch to come back here. So it was probably more emotional in regards to I'm missing out on something that I really wanted to do.
Right.
So I didn't really feel the financial impact though. I mean, obviously Trish takes care of the bill, so
Right.
she could tell me if we had financial
Right.
impact at the time. But for me, it was definitely more emotional on that piece of it, because like Trish said, for the longest time, I tried to take care of everything, and that was one of the first times I said, I'm gonna do something for me. I'm gonna go work up in Manhattan, and 6 weeks later, I'm like, I guess I'm not.
Right.
So that was
Right.
it was discouraging.
I can imagine. Yeah. And it's that loss of control because you can't stop them from coming.
Yeah.
You can sort of manage things if they ever did, but you can't control another adult's behavior. And I'm really active on a lot of social media sites, and I am constantly jumping in and answering questions when people say, how do I stop my husband from? And here's the thing, the only way to change someone is if they're in diapers.
Right.
You cannot change.
Someone 40 years old.
Right, yes.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Are they in diapers, right? Because here's the thing, and I say this, I can't even tell you how many times a week I say this, but if you draw an imaginary circle around your feet, the only people that you can control are standing inside the circle.
Right.
And people refuse to believe that, as did I, because I really did, try and manage this as I managed my career, which was guns blazing.
Right.
This is what we're going to do. We're going to make a U-turn with this cruise ship,
Right.
so to speak. And for her, it worked. But for many, many people, I remember the first time I heard about a 60-year-old heroin addict. And I said, it's like a unicorn, right? Because they don't make it to 60. And I was working for Penn at the time, and the patient was on hospice, and the nurse was telling me the story, and she said, and she's a heroin addict. And I said, no, you must be mistaken. She must be in recovery. She said, oh no. And I said, how in the world did they make it to 60? Because we're dying at a rate now that there is a generation of people that are dying, and nobody's paying attention. Nobody's paying attention. 18 to 29 are the most overdose fatalities right now in the United States. 77,000 people died last year, and nobody's paying attention. That's like the entire population of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
If Pittsburgh was wiped off the map, somebody would care, right?
Right.
These are 77,000 people that, as a collective, we're not saying that's a lot of people.
It did take us a long time to kind of get on the train with mental illness. So,
and we're still really not there,
I
because
agree.
where would you go right now if you knew somebody with a mental breakdown, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to really research.
Yeah.
It's not like you can say, oh, I'd go to this place.
I only know because of Nicole.
Right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
as somebody new coming in, where is the toolbox, right?
Right.
Because if you
There's-
go to a hospital and you're diagnosed with cancer, you get a oncology navigator.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this navigator that says, oh, Trish, I'm going to walk you through what's going to happen to you next.
Right.
Where's the addiction navigator for all these husbands, wives? There's an entire population of grandparents that are raising these grandchildren on a fixed income.
So there's so much. There's so much ahead. So maybe what's your ideal future for navigating addiction? Like, have you thought about kind of next 5 years what you'd want to see happen there? Like, if especially being kind of the only one out there,
Right.
and nobody really paying attention to all of this. Like, these are big statistics that we're talking about,
They are.
and it's not there yet. So
No. When I asked, I did a talk in a group 2 weeks ago, and I said, anybody give me an idea of how many addicts you think there are in the United States? And we were sort of all over the map, right, with what that number was, right? People need to know it's 22 million, right? 22 million addicts, yes. 22 million addicts, 77,000 deaths. In 2018, 77,000 deaths. 2019, there's 22 million people addicted to something in the United States, right? Huge, huge numbers. And when I asked the entire group to close their eyes and raise their hand, if they knew anybody that was impacted by addiction, or if their lives were, all but 3 out of this huge group of people raised their hand, right? But nobody leads with that.
right,
My goal is for navigating addiction to be sort of the source of truth, to where you go for reliable information for yourself to navigate your loved one's addiction. Not for them,
Right.
for how you navigate it. So the goal is that every day you can get a push notification for a motivational quote or saying.
Mm-hmm.
You can journal. We have a whole Spotify playlist for you. We have all of these resources for you to take some time for self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I want us to be the single source of information, much like any other site that we go to for information for other things on a daily basis without even thinking about it.
Right. And that it is so much bigger than just maybe one aspect.
Right.
Like, as you said earlier, the financial, the life coach, the dietitian.
The crisis.
Yeah.
How to
yeah.
use Narcan. I mean,
Yeah.
it's great to have Narcan, but if you don't know how to use it or you're too embarrassed to ask,
Right.
what do you do with it when it's in your house and you really need it? And how do you know when to give it? And, you know, we saw somebody the other day sort of trying to do chest compressions on somebody that was breathing. Not okay, but we don't know. We just don't know what to do, so we're all just doing the best we can.
Sure. Anything that you would first? How can people get a hold of you?
I am at navigatingaddiction@gmail.com. The app is available on both the Apple Store and on
I found it on Spotify.
and on Android. And
That's right.
yes, and 741-741 is if you are in crisis or your family member is. You text hello and somebody is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the app, sort of play around. There's a bookshelf. I forgot to mention the bookshelf with all vetted books on how to navigate this and how to best inform yourself, because information is power. So that's how you'll find me.
And don't be afraid to talk about it.
Don't be afraid to talk about it. No, I didn't talk about it for years. Forgot to say that. I didn't talk about it for years. The shame was so real. It was like a blanket that I covered myself with.
Well, ours wasn't even so much of shame, like with all of Nicole. It was just really kind of walking through the steps. Like you almost can't talk about it, or it's really hard to talk about it, especially when other people don't understand things that are going on, while you're trying to fix yourself and your family, like the rest of the family.
Right.
Like it's kind of to your point, that self-care you've neglected, like you have to kind of start picking up pieces and, have we actually sat around the dinner table yet this week as a family like we used to do,
Right.
things
Have
like
you
that.
checked in with your other family members?
Right. So yeah, for us, it just took time to start living again, to start being
Right.
okay that we were a -1 for the moment.
Right. And as long as there's still life, there's still hope.
Right.
But it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
And that's what people, we've become this social media persona that below the surface, that's not really what's going on, right?
Right.
Real life and Instagram life.
Right.
And once we sort of can break free from that and really be truthful and say, there's a lot going on here and I need some help. And that's where we come in. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
You're the
yeah.
9th person that I've talked to this week. It's so funny about how
What do you mean?
Instagram and Facebook life, and then your real life.
Oh,
Which I'm not on there very much. I go on there. I think everybody knows that I run and I take pictures of my dog. But I don't have the crazy Instagram life of The Rock or anything like that. But The Rock.
Yeah.
He's out there everywhere. But it is unique to how everybody says it. Like, oh yeah, it's so and so is doing awesome. Did you just see all the pictures? I'm like, I just saw them crying in the corner
Right.
about 5 minutes ago. I don't know what y'all talking about.
Right.
So it is interesting. So I think most of my groups that I'm in are real, not on Facebook. They're real people groups. So we go for a run. I have people at church. We do, these other groups that I'm part of. And it's, if I look at their group that we hang out with, and then I see them pictures on Instagram, I'm like, that is not the same person that I hang out with on the side. So it's, very unique on how everybody masks and hides on
It's
Instagram.
true.
And then real life, it's, I don't know if they're just trying to be nice to everybody else and they only have like 5 people that they truly trust, and that's why we're part of the group, and we all trust each other in the group,
Yeah.
very much so, and don't want to listen to, Wendy, I know everything, or Pam.
There is a lot of judgment though. Like I
It
think
is. It's judgment and it's shame.
Yeah.
Because nobody wears a shirt with their bank balance
Right.
and their weight,
Right.
on here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They don't have that. They don't say, "Hi Trish, my name's Stacy. My bank balance is negative $48
Right.
today. I get paid tomorrow."
Right. Right.
People
It's
don't
true.
people don't do that, and you would never expect, if you sort of scratch below the surface, what you would find in people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's where we need to start, and it just takes one person, like Michael Douglas's son, and him coming out, and Wendy Williams, and things like that, and people sort of surviving it and talking about it, rather than people that we find out after they've died.
Right. Right.
So I thought it was interesting.
It is.
You're
It's-
like the ninth person this
but
week that said it.
It's so
It's
true,
only
because
Tuesday.
how long has it been since I've seen you guys? But it
Yeah.
feels like yesterday, because
Yeah.
we're connected on social media.
Right.
I see you through her social media.
I was
But
gonna
it's
say,
been
yeah.
Who the guy is
years.
this?
Right, but it's been years and years, but it doesn't feel like that. So
Right.
that's in a good way, but then there are times where you isolate yourself from people where you don't want them to know the story, but you feel like you have that connection online, but it's not really real.
Right, right. And even like there's things that I will share, but there's also things that I haven't along
Sure.
the way. Like just because of that, like first of all, not everybody needs to know, to that level, but at the same time, if none of us are kind of talking about it at all, then that doesn't help.
And for a long time, I justified it with saying it's her story, not my story. And that's not really true.
I don't feel that way at all.
It's not really true,
Yeah.
though, right? It's not true
Because
at all, because
it's absolutely a part
the
of yours.
impact
Yeah.
that it had on me is long lasting. It's to
Yeah.
this day. It's really to this day.
Yeah.
When I think about these pockets of time, it was most certainly not her story.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that. Well, what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. I will link everything, but the Navigating Addiction, the website is great. The app is great.
Thank you.
Was checking it all out. There definitely are a lot of resources there. And so, first step for somebody, just download the app.
Download the app and start navigating around.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank
good
you.
to see you guys.
Dr. Elles.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny.